In 1896, an African army did something no one in Europe thought was possible. They didn't just resist a European invasion, they annihilated it. Within 6 hours, over 6,000 Italian soldiers were dead, captured, or in full retreat, and one of Europe's rising powers watched its own government collapse from the shame of it. This is the story of the only battle that stopped the scramble for Africa cold, and the emperor and empress who made it happen. By the end of the 19th century, Europe had already carved up almost the entire African continent. After the Berlin Conference of 1884, European powers drew borders across land they had never set foot on, and one by one, African kingdoms fell under colonial rule. Britain took Nigeria and Kenya, France took much of West Africa, Belgium took the Congo. By 1896, only 2 nations on the entire continent remained fully independent: Liberia and a mountain empire in the Horn of Africa called Ethiopia, known to Europeans then as Abyssinia. Italy wanted to change that. Italy had arrived late to the colonial race, and after securing a foothold on the Red Sea coast in Eritrea, it set its sights on the empire next door. In 1889, Italy offered Emperor Menelik II a deal known as the Treaty of Wuchel. On the surface, it looked like a normal diplomatic agreement: recognition, weapons, financial support. But there was a catch, hidden in translation. The treaty existed in 2 versions, one in Amharic and one in Italian, and the 2 versions did not say the same thing. The Amharic version gave Ethiopia the option to use Italy as a go-between in dealings with other European powers. The Italian version, Article 17 specifically, quietly turned that option into an obligation, secretly making Ethiopia an Italian protectorate on paper. For a few years, Italy got away with it, presenting the treaty to other European governments as proof Ethiopia already belonged to them. But Menelik found out, and in 1893, he did what almost no African ruler had ever done to a European power before. He tore up the deal in public. Italy didn't take the rejection well. Instead of renegotiating, Italy decided to simply take by force what it couldn't get by treaty, and war became inevitable. Menelik issued a call to arms across the empire, and men came from every region and every language, united under one cause. Historians estimate his army swelled to somewhere between 70,000 and over 100,000 soldiers, a scale European planners never accounted for. And Menelik did not do this alone. His wife, Empress Teta was one of the most forceful voices against Italian control, as she commanded her own contingent of roughly 5,000 infantry and 600 cavalry. Before the 2 armies ever reached Adwa, there was a smaller battle that revealed exactly what kind of war this was going to be. In January 1896, an Italian garrison held a fort at Mekelle, well-defended, well-armed, and confident it could hold out. Direct assaults on the fort were costly and kept failing. So Empress Tedu proposed a different plan entirely: cut off the fort's water supply and let the desert do the rest. 900 of her own soldiers carried out the plan. After 10 days without water, the Italian commander raised the white flag, and Menelik let the surviving soldiers go free, saying his quarrel was with Rome's government, not its ordinary men. By late February, both armies were converging near a small town in northern Ethiopia called Adwa, and both were quietly running out of food. The Italian force, roughly 15 to 17,000 men under General Oris Baratieri, was far from home in unfamiliar mountains with stretched supply lines. About half his troops were Italian. The rest were Askari, African soldiers recruited and trained by the Italians themselves. Menelik's massive army was also living off the land, and food was starting to run low on his side too. Baratieri actually knew this, and believed that if he simply waited, the Ethiopian coalition might fracture on its own from hunger. On the night of February 29th, Baratieri gathered his generals and told them plainly, they had less than 5 days of food left. He suggested retreating. His generals refused, and one reportedly said he'd rather lose the entire army than retreat in dishonor. Under pressure from his own officers, and from Rome, Baratieri gave in and ordered an attack for 9 the next morning. At dawn on March 1st, 1896, the battle began, and almost immediately, things went wrong for Italy. Moving at night through unfamiliar mountains, the Italian columns became separated from each other, a fatal error against an army of over 70,000 men who knew the terrain by heart. Menelik's forces didn't just meet the Italian advance, they surrounded it. One Italian column under General Albert I was cut off entirely and crushed. When General de Bormida tried to move his own column to relieve them, he marched his men straight into a valley where Ethiopian forces were waiting. Neither error could be undone. The fighting was brutal and fast. Ethiopian soldiers, defending their own homeland and their own sovereignty, fought with an intensity Italian command hadn't planned for. Two Italian generals, Giuseppe Aramondi and Vittorio de Bormida, were killed in the fighting. General Albert I was captured alive, and Baratieri himself narrowly escaped the battlefield as his army disintegrated around him. By late morning, within hours of the fighting starting, the Italian force wasn't just defeated, it was destroyed as a fighting unit, abandoning artillery and supplies as it fled toward Eritrea. Ethiopian forces could have pursued and wiped out the survivors entirely. Menelik gave the order not to. The numbers tell you how one-sided this became. Roughly 6,000 Italian and Ascari soldiers were killed, and around 3,000 more were taken prisoner. Italy's colonial army in the Horn of Africa had essentially ceased to exist in a single morning. So, why didn't Menelik finish the job and drive Italy out of Eritrea completely? His goal was never conquest. It was protecting Ethiopia's independence and forcing Italy to formally give it up, and he had already achieved that. News of the defeat reached Rome within days, and it landed like a bomb. Riots broke out in the streets of the Italian capital, and Prime Minister Francesco Crispi, who had pushed for the war, was forced to resign. The government that had promised its people an African empire had instead handed them one of the most humiliating military defeats of the entire colonial era. At the hands of the army, it had underestimated completely. On October 26, 1896, Italy signed the Treaty of Addis Ababa, formally canceling the Treaty of Wuchel and recognizing Ethiopia's full, unconditional independence. Ethiopia had done what almost no African nation would manage during the entire colonial era: fought a European power on its own terms and won outright. Adwa became a symbol far beyond Ethiopia's borders, proof, cited for decades afterward across the African diaspora, that colonization was not inevitable. After Adwa, Menelik used Ethiopia's new standing to modernize the country, building new schools, ministries, and a railway connecting Addis Ababa to the coast. Ethiopia would remain independent for nearly 40 more years, until a second, far larger war arrived in 1935. That's a story for another video. If you want to know how Ethiopia held on the second time Europe came back for it, subscribe because that story is next.